Well, that was all part of the plan. You see, as you follow the Nazi scheme work that has been outlaid, Werner von Braun told us plainly. Now, Werner von Braun, he plays heavily into the other half of the story as well. As I was saying, the other half is studying the Ordo Templi Orientis and the deeper occult. Werner von Braun being an SS officer deep in the occult, working with Jack Parsons, who was self-addressed head of the Ordo Templi Orientis, took over for Aleister Crowley, according to himself.
Yeah, the whole Nazi NASA connection is quite amazing. The whole Operation Paperclip, the whole thing is quite amazing when people get into that.
Well, so while tracking that whole story and looking at Obama and knowing the plan, you see, Werner von Braun told us the plan. He has Carol Rosin running around now, who was a secretary of his, to tell everyone, look, the plan is first there'll be the Red Scare. So this was, we're talking Nazi days. So first the Red Scare, which we went through. Then it would be terrorist, which we're just getting through. After terrorists would be followed by asteroids. And after asteroids, the alien invasion. These were the plans to bring about the one world nation, according to Werner von Braun. And he was warning us of this. So, take that as you will. But what happened is after we finished terrorism, and I don't know if you know, I predicted 9/11 to the day. I have a symbolic gesture method that I'm following that I've been able to predict events by their day, by their symbolic meaning, their symbolic gestures. 9/11, 10/13. Now I'm watching 4th of July at the Temple Mount is my latest symbolic gesture projection.
Okay, well that's interesting as well. I mean, they do, of course, do that. They're very, very big on dates and symbolism. There's so much symbolism involving 9/11 and in everything, all the corporate logos, everything. I keep trying to explain to people as well that we perceive a very narrow bandwidth of reality. So these symbols that are in place, they're not just signs, they're affecting you on a deeper level, on an energetic level. There's a lot of that going on as well. You were talking about magic earlier on. I think it's got a lot to do with that sort of thing. What people would call magic, which I simply perceive to be the manipulation of energy. If people understand that everything that exists is energy, and it's just understanding how to manipulate this energy, this is what people call magic. It's just having this knowledge. And this is the knowledge that a lot of these ancient bloodlines and ruling families have got. They know how to manipulate this energy.
Exactly. And you'll see it even in what they call archaeometry, which is the building of certain structures in a form so that it will permit the proper entities to enter. Sort of like Ghostbusters.
Yeah. Now, something else we were talking about the other day was we started talking, we found that our research was overlapping. I was talking to you about the holographic universe. I was talking about the work of Bruce Lipton, how our cells are literally computer chips. The membrane of our cells are literally computer chips, and we are downloading one frequency of consciousness into this body, which is actually a biological computer. This has all been proven by cellular biology. Like, this isn't sort of any sort of weird spiritual thing or any sort of esoteric thing. This is actual cellular biology. This is what they are understanding, that consciousness is not local to the body, that the air around you isn't empty, it's full of conscious energy, and you are simply downloading one frequency of that energy into yourself. And that's what you experience as Freeman, and what I experience as Max. Now, I've got some videos on my website. I've got a talk by Bruce Lipton, which is called Fractal Evolution. And you can look at that, and then you can look at another talk there that you've probably seen yourself by a lady called Jill Bolte Taylor, who had a stroke. It's called My Stroke of Insight. She had a stroke. She had a tumour on the left-hand side of her brain, and it blocked out the left side of her brain. And she connected with the whole field because all she had to go with was the right side of the brain. What I'm trying to say is I've got all this stuff there on the website. People can go and look at this, and they can start to understand the energetic nature of reality, and they can start to see how this works, how everything is operating on frequencies of electromagnetism. Now, do you believe that all this ties into HAARP? Because you've been doing research into all the antennas and the different frequencies and what's going on with the chemtrails and all this sort of stuff. And what you were telling me the other day is made totally possible by all of this cellular biology and black hole theory and stuff that's been put forth by Nassim Haramein, and all of this is starting to tie in together. I mean, a lot of people's researches, I'm finding, are starting to overlap. So do you want to talk a little bit about the chemtrails that you were telling me about the other day and the antennas and the HAARP system that they've got in place?
Sure. As we began this crusade about 1996, that's about the time America was getting hit heavy with chemtrails. And when that occurred, it actually would come all the way down to the streets, as if they did not have the proper, chemical connections yet. So things were coming down, and people were finding spider-like substances in their front lawns and on their cars and whatnot. And anyone that would touch this would immediately suffer from flu-like symptoms. And what happened is the news actually began reporting flu-like symptom epidemic. I mean, what double speak there, right? What is a flu-like symptom epidemic?
Yes, actually, it's interesting you say that, how they were like, there was visible substances you could see and you'd go up and touch. You can almost see the progression of how they've improved the chemistry along the way.
Definitely. And, I think, well, okay, one thing that we know for certain is that in the Middle East, when they were tracking insurgents, they would feed them barium. Okay, and we can see clearly in the movie like The Running Man with Governor Schwarzenegger that they inject him with barium to track him in the field, to track him in the Running Man game. So we know from, military sources and from just any, Hollywood sources that barium is a tracking agent. That's what it's used for. Now, the two ingredients that we're finding in the reason for the flu-like symptoms was the barium. Now, I have my own personal experiences with much of the weather modification and the tracking agents that they have used because I do rainbow gatherings, which is where a whole group of people from all over the world, and mostly, in the U.S., come together on one national forest to gather there for the 4th of July every year. And this is done in order to resound the fight on our public lands, because these were the national forests given to humanity, now being taken over as federal parks. So the Rainbow go out there, and they're considered a terrorist organization. So immediately, under their new laws that we've had under 9/11 and everything else, we are an open target. And in 1996, when the chemtrail campaign really began in America, they seemingly hit us with barium. I believe it was in the water. Everyone got sick. Everyone I know had a horrible cough that most of us have not gotten rid of. I got blood poisoning and almost died, ended up in the hospital 2 weeks later of an anxiety attack, which I had no purpose having, and found that I had a potassium depletion. Well, it turns out that these are all symptoms of barium poisoning. So if you're starting to feel flu-like symptoms, lethargy, all the aching joints and all of this, along with a sense of panic, these are the signs and symptoms that you have heavy metal poisoning. And because doctors don't believe in conspiracy theory, they are not testing your blood for barium. They're not testing you for heavy metals. All the healers are trying to approach a virus, and you're dealing with heavy metals. So this is something that's critical for people to know. So the two ingredients in the chemtrails are barium and aluminum. You suck these in, and you then become a radiating antenna. The barium makes you show up on what's called the X-band radar, and that just happened to ship over to Alaska right before a Katrina hit. And HAARP is a large antenna array which shoots low-frequency radio waves up into the ionosphere and can be used on many frequencies, but mostly functions on the brain frequency. And so now you are an antenna with all the aluminum in your system, and you're a beacon with all the barium in your system. They can now track and manipulate you.
Yeah, well, that actually makes an awful lot of sense. But when you tie it in with the research that I was talking about before of Bruce Lipton and understanding how all this is a biological computer that operates on frequency and electromagnetism. And this is exactly what HAARP can do. Actually, I've got I don't know whether you've seen it, but on my website, thecrowhouse.com, you can go to the chemtrail water test results, and it shows the tests of the water that's been coming down in the rain and the tank water in the area where I'm living. And it shows exactly what's in some of the things that they're spraying around here. This is what's coming down in the rain. And people have got to look at this, because there's no such thing as organic gardening or organic farming anymore, not if your crop's getting rained on, because what are they spraying in the sky? This is getting into everything. It's getting into the entire food chain, and it's doing an awful lot of damage.
Exactly, right along with their GMO,
Well, that's the thing, That's why you've got to start looking at all this, and this is why I've been trying to look at all angles as well, because when you really look at what's going on with the GMO food, well, they're basically destroying all of the whole food chain, The GMO food has got the potential of doing so much harm, and all the fluoride that's getting dropped in, even from people brushing their teeth and spitting this stuff down the sink, well, it's got to go somewhere when you spit it down the sink. It goes into the ocean. We're finding fish with high levels of fluoride in them. It's getting into the entire food chain. All the GMOs are getting into the food chain. All the chemtrails are getting into the food chain. All the oil and all the toxicity that we're producing, it's all just completely destroying everything around us. And eventually, if we go on the way we are, it'll end up in the extinction of all life on this planet. So you begin to wonder, is this just false ego? Is this what happens when false ego is rampant? Or is there another agenda? Is something else in charge here?
Exactly. The key ingredient is that this is not humane. It's not human. And as we start to look and we see the perpetrators, and now, as I said, I was Rainbow, I also just travel from home to home. I travel all over the nation, meeting humans all over the place, and they're all nice, loving, caring, generous people. I've not yet met one of these evil people that wanted to destroy the world. I just don't find them on my path.